Welcome to Culture Before Content. Culture Before Content from Music for All and presented by Yamaha. And now, here's your host, David Duarte.
Hey, welcome to the show. As they said, I'm David Duarte, your host, and as always, welcome. And for most of you, maybe welcome back. Who knows? But as a reminder, our mission is to create, provide, and expand positively life-changing experiences through music, which I know everyone does every single day. And here at Music for All, I'd also like to say thank you to Yamaha, who is our national presenting sponsor, and thanks to Music for All for making this podcast happen. And now just a couple of housekeeping items every week. So there's two ways to watch live, and maybe some of you are here. Maybe you can let us know. I'm here on Facebook. I'm here on YouTube. That's our two ways. So if you're going to find the show live, you can go to Facebook every Saturday. Just scroll down to the events tab, and you can mark that you're interested in going when you find the link. And then, it happens typically on Saturday, and that's how you can watch and participate in the show. You could probably do it right now if you want. And then if you are watching, you should share it on your socials. Share it on Facebook, mail it to your friends, get more people here. And then the other way is you can watch it on YouTube. It's super simple on YouTube. You just go to YouTube and you just type Music for All, one word, and you'll find the live tab and you can find the show. And I do something cool every week. I put it on my Instagram and send out the link. It's super fun, but you can also join the chat that way. And actually on YouTube and Facebook, you can always post after. It's super interesting. But if you're going to listen after the fact, you can always watch the videos. And then there are also the audio and the amazing audio podcasts. You can find them usually every Monday and sometimes Tuesday. It just depends, but they'll pop up. Just sign up for them. And they happen on Apple, they happen on Spotify and all major podcast platforms. But you can find everything typically in one place every week at musicforall.org/podcast. But every episode's there. We are on episode, 83. So many, so fun. All right. Well, enough of the rigmarole. Is that a word? I think it's a word. Who knows? We have a great guest this week. Looking forward to it. We got some commonality going here. We have Theresa Hoover. She is a music educator, researcher, author, and clinician whose work centers on student voice, learner-centered instruction, and meaningful music making. She currently serves as a teaching instructor of music education at East Carolina University, go Pirates, while pursuing a PhD in music learning and music learning and teaching at Arizona State University. Go Sun Devils. And Theresa has taught instrumental, general, and folk music, and most recently as a middle school band director in Northern Virginia. She is the author of Empowering Ensembles with Technology, co-author of Pass the Baton, Empowering All Music Students, and co-host of Pass the Baton podcast. Yay, podcasters. Presenting regularly at state, regional, and national conferences. I don't know why I say that word so wrong every time, but please welcome to the show, Miss Theresa Hoover.
Hello.
I don't know why I always say that. It's like, presenting presently, really hard words for me today.
Sometimes words are hard.
Well, I think words are hard for me all the time. So why don't you tell us your version of who you are? Because I think I got a lot of it covered in there. And I was creeping your Facebook the other day. I saw you were doing some honor bands recently and, and some hiking. Kind of jealous on that one. I love the outdoors. But tell us a little bit about Theresa Hoover.
Oh boy. Well, that's always a big one. I guess you could say, I'm a music teacher first and foremost. I spent 19 years in the classroom teaching, like you said, mostly elementary and middle school band, but I've done a little bit of everything. Then I took a little pivot and went back to school to get to work on my doctorate at Arizona State. And as you said, music learning and teaching. If we could all just keep our fingers crossed, I should be graduating this semester. So appreciate all the good vibes on that one. But currently I'm working at East Carolina University as a teaching instructor of music ed, which means I teach music education classes, and it's awesome.
I think it's great. One of my dreams, I had a couple of dreams and I don't know why I have them, but, I wanted to be a music ed professor. I wanted to be a saxophone instructor. I think when you're young and you're in music, you just love it so much and you kind of find those things. And that's where my pursuit was. I really thought I'd be a music education professor. So I took the different task and went admin at a district instead. It's kind of similar without all that. But, what are some of the things, and I always like to talk about when you go from the classroom to teaching university, and then it's kind of like you get a whole there's always the version of what you think is out there, but then there's the reality of what it is. And I was curious, like, what's your take on when you made the transition from, the classroom to university teaching? What are some of the things that you noticed, or what are some of the cultural things that you noticed, and the difference from like what you thought and what you're presenting to your students?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I guess the first thing I'll say is I was the opposite. I never thought I would leave the classroom like that. I assumed I was going to be there forever. But then I started working with adults more and doing more presenting and more workshops and things like that. And it was like, oh, I really like working with teachers. And that was kind of where that shift happened. I also realized that like the difference I made would be almost more impactful, because if I could help the music teachers, then I was also helping all of their students. So it was just kind of opening different doors. Um, as far as the differences in culture, yeah, I mean it's very different. Music schools are interesting in that we're helping to work with these young people who to be both incredible musicians and incredible teachers. So helping them to find the balance and helping them to find their identity as a music educator is really been interesting. In a lot of ways, there are similarities. Like you'd be maybe not surprised how much college freshmen are like middle school kids. Sorry, guys, but it's true. And it's just a lot of really neat things. And when I go into a college class, I'm still thinking about a lot of the same things I was thinking about in the K-12 system. Like, how am I helping to make experiences that these students are going to feel like are meaningful to them, have, they're going to be valuable for their futures. I'm really just thinking intentionally about what I do to help them best be successful when they get into their own classrooms. Did that
Yeah, I think
kind of answer?
that totally does that. Because what pops in my head is really empathy. Because I think, we as, when you get experience as a classroom teacher, you want to, you want to share it. And so like, sharing with your own students, that's one thing. But when I'm sure when you got to the university level and you're starting to make your impact, you're wanting them to have, like I always tell them, can we just like put a wire in my head? Here's my knowledge. Take it, and you take it because you probably do it better than I will. But I want to share all that knowledge. And it's like that whole thing. Experience is the best teacher that you can have.
Mhm.
And we're always trying, as adults, we're always trying to give experience ahead of time, and there's no way to do it until you do. So, and I was thinking, were any of your perceptions different, or like, do you have a different perception now, or even if somebody's thinking about teaching university, what would be some advice on like what to expect?
I mean, it is very different. I'm trying to think about how to word this the best way. The schedule is very different. I love that. Some people might not. Some people might appreciate the more structured. We're there from 8 to 3 or whatever it is. Um, you do have to be aware that there could be some pay differences. Just saying that, depending on what part of the country you're in, it might be a decrease in income coming from your public school to your university. You just never know. Um, and it's also different because I do find myself, and might sound strange, sitting like at a desk a lot more than I did when I was teaching band.
Really?
When I was teaching band, I was up and moving and doing, and now, I don't teach 8 classes a day, right? So there's a lot more sitting and grading work and things like that. Now, again, I love it. I get to go out in the classrooms and I get to observe student teachers and just all kinds of fun things like that. But it is a different kind of lifestyle.
Oh my God, student teachers, I think would be my favorite thing to do. I think when I actually retire, that's my dream, is that I could actually go be the student teacher supervisor. Because when I just had a student teacher up here, his supervisor was one of the retired teachers from the area. And then I got it was great, get a chance to hang out, talk shop and all that things. But what also popped in my mind is I was thinking about this, and you can speak to this as a university teachers. I really wish that I could get this podcast or something like this podcast and more like the classrooms for the majors. Because I think every week, if you've watched any of the episodes in the past, that one of the commonalities we talk about is preparation and advice to young teachers. And always, and like I said, it goes back to that empathy thing, is if you could just take the information and trust, because how much of teaching music is your job when you start those first few years. I mean, yeah, that's the part of it, but you're trying to survive like paperwork. What's that paperwork? Or Craig's
Absolutely.
favorite one, how do I get a bus? That's, because that's,
Yeah.
I think that bus is important, but there's all these things that, it's not that it's not college's responsibility to teach you those things, but there are some commonalities that we have when we become educators that you're like, oh, I wish I would have known that. That's why I think this podcast serves, and many of the podcasts, and I'd love to talk about your podcast next. But it can serve as something for people to, for students to look at and go, oh my God, I never thought about those things, or, it's those lovely things that we want to talk about. Oh, I see my favorite thing happening in the background, by the way. I see a puppy. I love puppies.
Yeah,
I look so
he decided
happy.
to be part of this conversation.
Well, at least it's with a tail. If I had my puppy in the
He's
background,
nothing.
he'd be adding to the show. There would be barking. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
But let's go ahead and shift the gears. So like let's talk about a little bit of Theresa Hoover culture. Like, let's talk about your podcast and what that offers, and then getting to know you. So talk about maybe a little bit of your podcast, and then maybe go on to your books and stuff. But let's start off with your podcast and what it offers.
So my podcast is called Pass the Baton, and as you mentioned before, it's a co-hosted. I co-host with Catherine Finch. She's an awesome elementary general music teacher in the Chicago area. Catherine and I met, believe it or not, on Twitter in 2016. So go figure, right? And we connected as two music teachers who were both we were questioning if what we were doing was working. Honestly, I was teaching at the time elementary band and orchestra. She was teaching general music, and we were just asking a lot of questions. And those questions ended up just turning into a wonderful friendship and partnership and a book, which we then turned into our podcast. So with Pass the Baton, we're thinking about how we can help students have more ownership in music, how we can help them to feel more empowered in music. So with our podcast, we're basically interviewing people, music teachers who are doing things in their classroom that kind of aligns with what we're thinking about. So they're finding ways to make students feel like they have more of a voice, to help students feel more musical, to help them think about how they can be musical lifelong, things like that. So
there it is.
Hey, there's the book. Yeah. So that's kind of what Pass the Baton is. So our podcast is mostly interviews with just incredible music teachers. And I'm sure, as you find, David, it's like partially a selfish thing. Like, yes, I get to talk to really cool people.
It is completely selfish. And I always tell people, for some reason, I got signed up to get my own professional PD every single show that we have. And I learned so much, because I was thinking, your podcast is on all the major platforms as well. So for those of you out there in the audience, go to Apple, go to Spotify, just do your search and search I just typed Pass the Baton podcast and you will find it easily. And it's kind of like those same things, I think we all get these ideas as we grow up, though, of wanting to share and do all those things, and so, and then I think that sharing kind of helps us process the things that we do. Like I know, this podcast has helped me find my voice, and it reminds me when I'm in the classroom of those things I do. Are you getting those kinds of same experiences?
Absolutely. Like just the opportunity to hear from everybody and have to really reflect on what we do in the classroom is incredible. I feel like every single guest I learned something from. I'm trying things. It's been awesome. And what's kind of funny, and I hope you don't mind if I go this direction for a moment. So my dissertation's actually on why music teachers listen to podcasts. So
really?
I've been reading all the literature about podcasts, and so many people do talk about them in a professional development standpoint, that people see them as professional development. And then from just my research, finding that, people are going to podcasts because they want the information, but they're also doing it because they want to feel connected to other music teachers.
But also, I think some of those things that you say, though, when we do these podcasts, sometimes I realize what I don't know. Like, I don't know about you, but as I get older, I feel like I know less and less. And then every time I listen to a podcast, I'm like, oh my God, I wish I would have thought, I always think that I wish I would have thought of that when I was younger, or even last week sometimes.
Yeah.
Are there any big moments that you can remember from your podcast, like something that maybe changed you, or maybe just, one of those happy spots of the podcast?
Yeah, one thing that comes back to me a lot, and I can't remember what episode, but the guest was Jared Brockmeyer. He was awesome, but he talked about just the language we use in the classroom and how if we can stop saying I and me, that it actually makes a big difference, because it shifts the focus. Every time I say, I need to hear the alto saxophones play louder, I need the tubas to do this, I need my, every time we do that, we're putting the focus on ourselves. But if we can get rid of those words, it helps to remind all of us that we're here together as an ensemble to make music. It's
Oh,
not
we could
about me, it's about them.
start going for some of those hot takes. I mean, those I love these hot takes. Like, do you really ever need any more alto saxophone in band? I'm just kidding. I am a sax player after all. You know, I have had my life with the hand, and it's funny that you say that, I mean, because I think of that even in both directions. The teacher, thinking from the teacher on the podium or the teacher in the classroom, it isn't about us, it's about the students, but it's also the true for the students. It's not about them, it's about the classroom.
Yeah.
And so, you
Yeah.
know, how do we
And
like pass that to those, you know, how do we pass that to students? How do we pass that to teachers? How do we make these connections? Because it sounds like we have that same thing of connection is the be all end all of existence for us. But how do we make those? I'm, you know, so I really have a question there.
yeah, I mean, I think the hard thing is for students, if you think developmentally, especially like middle school age,
Mm-hmm.
I is all they understand, right? That's developmentally like a normal thing for them to be thinking only of themselves. So to kind of open it up to there's more than just me is big for a kid at that age. But I think as the teacher, the biggest thing we have to do is just we have to listen. You know, I was kind of reflecting on this before before we started recording and whatnot. Culture before content. When we're thinking about culture, I think as the teacher, we have to make sure that we're listening to the people who are in the room with us, to the community, to the school, all of that, to think about how they view culture, and then help that inform what we do moving forward. So I think in order to help to get students on board with this whole we thing, so we have to listen to them, because if we're just saying, here's what I want the culture to be, see, there's that word I again, right? If we're just saying, this is what I think the culture should be, this is what I think, how I think our ensemble should run, all of those things, we're leaving them out from the get-go.
I think this comes down to, like, you know, thinking of the activities that we do. Because like I was talking to somebody, I think it was yesterday, and we were talking about, you know, a lot of times what I've experienced since I've moved is I find a lot of programs teach a lot of music to the kids, but not a lot of interactive. You know, the education part seems to be skipping in a lot of people. And I've become one of those people in the old ages, like, okay, the concert's going to happen, it's going to be what it is, but I'm getting more and more interested on how I can better serve what we're doing. Like, you know, and I was talking about marginalized composers. There's purpose in all of those things that I do. And you know, it's funny that you say student voice, because sometimes it's hard to get them to, like, you have to model it to get it. And so sometimes that even becomes the thing. It's like, you know, we have to do a marginalized composer. Awesome. Well, what are we doing with that besides marginalized composers? That's where I think we talk about what we need to do, but what are those next steps to do it? When we talk about student-centered classrooms, getting that shift. This is my big one. Ready? Here comes my hot take. Letting go of the music, and it will actually be better the moment you let it go. Let the kids take responsibility for the learning, and you will do a lot less, I think. But I said, I'm kind of an opinionated person, so
it's also more fun. It is so much more fun when they can just light up because they're offering suggestions, or you're hearing what they think about it. Like, there's so much. It's a joyful experience. It really is. But we have to also be careful on the other side. We can't just go, okay, you do it, and then kind of walk away, right? Especially if we're starting with a program that was not like that at all. We have to make sure we think about how are we going to help them be successful in this situation. You know, even just from the student voice perspective, if I were to walk into somebody's ensemble and say, okay, tell me what you think, they would probably all stare at me. because they may not have had that question asked before, and nobody may have let them think that their opinion was important, and they don't know me. So how are we going to help to build that level of trust that, yes, you can tell me what you think, and we're still going to be good. Everything's going to be, we're still going to have that moment, that relationship. So I think we have to remember that you've got to take the steps to build it too.
Oh my God, we should have a whole podcast on building relationships that are not, you know what I'm saying? Because I just took over a job this year, and so that whole building relationships is super key. And I've talked about it with Mr. Gustafson. Craig, I know you're out there listening, but what we talk about all the time is how long it's going to take before we know that what we're doing is impactful. The hardest thing I think as an older teacher is patience. And I don't mean having it. I think it's just like living through it when you know what's going to happen. Like I have this belief that when you walk in the classroom, there are some things. There's going to be conflict. There's going to be resolution. There's going to be love. There's going to be, I don't say hate, I say dislike. There's going to be all of those things. But I think that part of that acceptance of being a teacher and experience is knowing that that's coming and how to deal with that, and how to keep moving it forward. And, I was just thinking about, I have a question that I ask everybody, like honor bands. I go around the world asking this question. I'll even ask you the question. I don't even know if I've done it on the podcast, to be honest with you. I will bet bucks that someone will type it in the comments before I answer. I should give some time, but what's the answer?
What's the
answer? I said that's what's the answer? I have not given you anything. I have given you nothing, but I want to know what's the answer. And it's kind of the first thing I wanted to talk about on the show. Watch. If you can pop that up, there it is. The answer is clarity. So I asked that for I want you to think about this, because again, we've both taught general music. We've both taught vocal music. We both taught instrumental music. We both taught like all levels. Oddly, the only grade I have never taught officially is 8th grade. The only one. I've taught everything else. I've never taught 8th grade. I mean, I've worked with them, but I've never been assigned that. But I think about clarity all the time, because it's the thing, like when you're teaching a classroom, and you say, okay, I want you to breathe and I want you to play this note and go. You're looking for note clarity, rhythmic clarity, and I think clarity is like that magic thing that we can do. Like right now, like even our conversation, when I asked the question, what did you lack? Now it's easier to ask the question. What did you lack when I asked you the question? Clarity. And I guess that's what maybe this podcast is: clarity before culture, before content, because we are, how do we get clarity in the classroom? Like when you said building that relationship, well, let's have a clear picture of what that looks like. And I know a lot of backwards design goes in my head right now of when I do that. And so like, even as your dissertation, because now that you've done now that you're doing a doctorate and you've done a master's, how much of those degrees changed you and your perspective of how to teach? Because I know how much my master's changed me instantly. I stopped, again, clarity. So let's start that. What do you think about clarity? What pops in your head?
Well, I think it's important, because if I'm thinking, when you say clarity, the first thing I think about is when I'm working with people to make sure it's clear what my expectations are, and I'm being clear about what what I'm bringing to the table. So I think that clarity as a teacher is important for the students to be successful. Does that?
Yeah. I mean, this is what's cool about clarity. There's no right or wrong answer, and I think about in terms of it can work on anything. When you're learning to drive a car, you need what's the clarity. And it goes back to my whole thing about thinking about systems, design, all of those things. But I know there's a question coming up that Craig put in the chat that I would like to, and I can tell you who it is. What strategies? That's not English. What strategies? English is hard. Do you use to build that trust so students are willing to use their voice with the ensemble? That's a great question.
Absolutely. That's a good one. I mean, I guess for me, the first thing I think about is just, are the students comfortable talking to each other, right? Even if they're not comfortable talking to me, are they comfortable talking to each other? So back in November, I was conducting an all-county band. None of these kids knew me, not one of them. But I knew, just knowing who I am, that I knew that I wanted to have I wanted to have rapport with them so that I could ask questions and get kids to feel comfortable. So the first thing it was, okay, turn and talk to your stand partner. Tell them, I don't remember, it was probably tell me your name, what school you go to, and something else silly. It was, what did you do over the weekend? What's something you had for lunch? I don't remember. Just something that's very low stakes. Like nobody would feel uncomfortable sharing whatever the thing was. So we started with just that. And then it was, hey, who would be willing to introduce their stand partner? And then I, handful of kids tell me who their stand partner was. And then, from there, kind of getting it to just building the questions up, getting them talking to each other first, whoever was sitting next to them, and then saying, okay, would anybody like to share that out? Hey, what do you think that the composer meant in this section? What does it sound like? Talk to your stand partner. Okay, cool. Who wants to share? So I think you have to start with the really low stakes stuff, the stuff that doesn't require much vulnerability. Right. And then we can start to move on to the big things. And once they start feeling comfortable that they can talk, then when you say, hey, what do you think we should do with this phrase? then you start to hear their ideas. And that's, to me, that's when it gets fun, because they're going to tell you really off the wall stuff and you're going to try it. And it's like,
but there's nothing wrong with that.
Right. Right. Because you might try it and you might like it more than what you were explaining already.
Well, this is maybe the getting older thing, but I'm thoroughly convinced there are people that do everything better than I do. And sometimes I just have to discover it, fall into it, see it, hear it, and I'm an experiential learner. I'm not even sure that's the thing. That's just my word of the day. But if I don't experience something, I am that's where the only time I really feel like anxiety enters in my mode. If I have never done something, or I haven't been somewhere, haven't met somebody, haven't done a piece of music, that's the only time, because my brain creates that weird thing called doubt. And the students might not see it, or they might not put it there, but it really ends up becoming that driver for me of getting the classroom to open up, speak up. Because I think, when you get the kids talking, when you ask them that question, I love asking questions like, what did you do this weekend? Or like, what's your favorite movie? Or anything, just to get the conversation going. Because I think what happens is students start to speak when they weren't used to speaking it. And then once that comfort level goes, that anxiety goes away. And I think that's some of those things is just, spending time to form relationships is huge. And I think sometimes we just have to remind ourselves of that, even day to day.
Yeah. Because when we're asking students to do a lot, to play their instruments in front of other people, that we're asking a lot of them. So if they can feel comfortable with those people, it's going to make it a better situation. I think just over time, I've become less focused on the concert. It's because that to me isn't it, for a long time in my career. That was the thing. That was where I measured the success. That's how I judged myself. That was the goal. Anymore, that's, it's along the path. It's something that we're still going to do, and we're going to do our best and all of that. But that's not the goal. The goal is, do these kids feel musical when they leave my classroom?
I hate to say this, but it's okay to teach the kids and let some things, again, that whole thing of letting some things go. I think, it took me 15 years of teaching before I kind of realized what I was and wasn't doing. And I kind of had to it was kind of like a moment for me. But as soon as I let go of teaching music and started teaching, teaching skill sets, teaching, the habits, letting students, teaching students how to practice, what to practice, the more I let go of the music, once I got there, the better the music happened. And but I had to have belief, because this goes back to maybe the original conversation of teaching the music to the students sometimes overwhelmingly becomes the focus of a classroom. Not that this is all about band. I'm not saying that, but it really took a moment and for me to realize that. And I, as an administrator walking through classrooms, what I learned was, yeah, we teach the music to the kids because we're so worried about that concert, or worse, it's that time of the year. Oh, I got to say my standard practice comment. Somebody out there, while you're home, because I know a lot of us are going to be home for the cold, not me, but order your scores. You got to order your scores. Festival's coming, so order your scores now. I'm just throwing that out. Now's the time. But what I'm saying is, it just takes a while to build up all those things that makes a band happen for me. And teaching the music, if you could not tell the kid, hey, you missed that flat in measure 17. For me, like I always said, why did I stop? Or, again, this goes back to systems. Here's one of the things that I do. I expect my students to go in and mark their music with a yellow highlighter of any key signature application or altered note. And because the highlighter, that way you don't really see it. It's not a like, I don't know about you, but I cannot get through a concert like, oh yeah, that was a B flat. What the heck? I played it right 74 times, and on the concert, for some reason, my brain just randomly. But when I have the highlighter there, it happens naturally, because it's that whole, it just becomes part of the process. I have like blue for dynamics that the kids use highlighters for. But the problem is I don't want to do it to all the music all the time and all the things, because then your music looks like Spumoni. But really, but I do like the yellow highlighter on key signature application and no altered notes, because it takes away some of that things that they have to worry about, or that, but getting that engagement. So do you have any cool things that you've come across, or in your pedagogical things?
I'm trying to think. I mean, a lot of it, again, I use like student to student communication and collaboration as much as I can, so in that case, I stopped. Okay, we stopped, turn to your stand partner and show them how to play F sharp
Yeah.
or, whatever the case may be. But real quick, talk to the person next to you, make sure you both know how to do this. Give them 30
Gosh,
seconds to do it, come back. I mean, even just like take a minute by yourself right now and practice this. I've become much more okay with loud chaos in my room, like
uh,
controlled loud chaos, which young teacher Theresa was not okay with that. But now take a minute, practice that by yourself and like let them all just noodle through it for a minute. Then we all come back together and it's usually better. Like
it's
I
funny
don't have to
because
control it. Mhm.
what reminds me of that is I watched the LA Philharmonic, and
Mm.
they had a red clock, an LED. This is like back in the 90s, like actually I think it was 90. And they had that red clock on the stage, and I didn't understand what it was for. But the minute it turned to 5 o'clock, whenever the rehearsal ended, people just put and they were in the middle of something. People just put their instruments away and left. And then I realized at that moment that union practice of like that's the value of your time.
Mm.
One of the best things that's happened, I'm going to digress a little. The best things that's happened is we all kind of have the same time. If I say it's, look at your watch, look at your phone, we all have the same time now
Yeah.
because that's the way it functions. So when you say practice for 30 seconds, what I've gotten to, this goes back to that LA Phil thing was, I really mean 30 seconds. I'm going to give you
Mhm.
exactly 30 seconds. I have a watch face that has like the little timer,
Mhm.
and I just can do 30 seconds. And I've really found out that being rigid like that, students appreciate, adults appreciate, like, hey, I'm going to give you a minute, I'm going to give you 2 minutes, because I think sometimes David Coons was good about this. One of our former guests, he's like, the kids don't practice at home, depending on the
Mhm.
area, and so you need to build that into your classroom. And I find that by adding some of those time things in the classroom,
Absolutely.
it's super helpful. Like, hey, I want you to take 2 minutes, I want you to take 5 minutes, or I want you to go share with your partner, and it'll be exactly 5 minutes. And you can kind
Mhm.
of put those timers on the board. But I found that some of that rigidness is super helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. And with the practice thing, you see it in like the Facebook groups all the time. How do I get the kids to practice? How do I get one of the best things I was ever told was just assume they don't. Assume they
I
did
was
not
just
practice and then start your rehearsal with that assumption. And best case scenario, you're pleasantly surprised that they did, right? but but that way you're not upset about it. You're going into it with that intention and you plan the rehearsal very intentionally. The other thing I really like doing is at the end of the rehearsal, getting the students to tell me what we need to do next, right? At
oh, I
the
like that.
whether it's on a Post-it note or on a Google form or whatever, give me 3 things we need to work on the next rehearsal. I don't really know what's going on at the end of the trumpet section, right? I don't really know what that 3rd
I,
clarinet player is like,
I don't
all
think
those
you want
things.
to know what's going on at the end of the trumpet
No
section,
kidding.
just to be honest.
But we do our best to know what's going on with but we don't, we're only doing our best. So get the kids to give you 3 things that they want to work on next rehearsal and then
And
acknowledge
also,
it.
I'm even going to tag onto that idea because a friend of mine gave me this idea of just take those 3 things and actually get like pieces of paper, then cut them all the same, and have the kids put them on the wall somewhere in the room. And when they've done their 3 things, have them pick them up and just hand them to you. And I thought that was a
Yeah.
great idea. You can do 5, you can do 10, you can do whatever. You have the
Mhm.
kids set goal setting. I think is one of those other things that we could talk about.
Yeah.
The culture of goal setting, because as I always try to say, we got to figure out the difference between wishes and goals. I want to get a
Mhm.
superior. Well, that's kind of a wish. What's the goal? I mean, the goal is to
Yeah.
play your best. How do you
Mhm.
define that? And I think that's kind of some of our classroom practices as well.
Mhm.
So
Yeah. Well,
thinking about, do you have any other, like, I was thinking like technology, or do you have any other kinds of like those kinds of things that help the classroom?
yeah, I mean, technology, if you're going to use it, it needs to be intentional. I'm a big fan of it, especially for getting things like we talk about student voice, just getting to hear from every kid. If you have a really easy way for them to answer a poll or a Mentimeter or one of those little like polling tools, that can be great to hear from every kid quickly. Because in a typical ensemble rehearsal, you've got 30, 40 more kids. You can't always hear every single student's voice every day. We would love to, we just don't have the time. But if you can get input from them through any of those tech tools, that's a great way to do it. The other thing that I think we don't do enough of in the ensemble world is composition and those kind of things. And again, I was just as much that, this was a problem for me as well for a long time. But now there are so many tools out there where we can get kids kind of composing and creating and thinking about music in a way that's not just recreating somebody else's work, right?
Oh yeah. Well,
So,
I'm going to tag on to that because the other
mhm.
one that goes with composition to me is improvisation.
Oh my
Uh,
goodness, yes.
sorry,
Yes.
I love it when I feel like the connection there because I think improvisation. I think the first thing that comes to everyone's mind is jazz, and it's not true. It's
No.
not true. You can teach improvisation for their very various and different reasons. My English is terrible today, but I was thinking because composition and improvisation can go hand in hand, and
Oh yeah.
you can spark the two. You improv a composition, compose an improvisation. I get you can kind of some of those things, but I was thinking, and my high school brain's going like a mile a minute. I have this is how weird I am. I have broken down binary code into like 4 digits, and that gives you the 16 rhythms out of binary code that you can put into 16th note base, all that stuff. You could literally like, hey, improvise a melody on
Mhm.
this rhythm, and you can at the same time teach composition, teach rhythm,
Mhm.
teach articulation.
Yeah.
What's the answer? Clarity.
Clarity.
You can get clear all. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
going to keep going to that, but
Well, I
yeah,
mean, with that, like what's the tool? Rhythm Randomizer is a great
mhm.
little free website. Do the rhythm randomizer, put the rhythm up. Okay, cool. Now play a melody, create a melody that's going to go with that rhythm. And then play it on your instrument and then throw it up.
Well,
Oh, now it becomes a sight reading exercise. Like, all of these things.
I was thinking
It
about
just
too, like, because I was thinking music. Now I got music theory popping in my head because the
Mhm.
hard thing for me is music theory kind of has to be embedded in your instruction. It can't be like sometimes it can be the sole purpose, but like just it goes back to the improvisation, teaching structure of a chord, teaching those things because harmony. When you get into composition, harmony becomes important. And then
Mhm.
teaching it that consonance and dissonance. I think I could do a whole podcast on those two words, and just teaching how those things get through. But again, I just I think part of life is just coming up with ideas or what's successful and those sharing out. And so I was thinking, you said Mentometer. I just
Mhm.
for those of you out there, if you don't know what that is, just Google it.
Mhm.
It's an amazing tool, and they got some cool, amazing other things that they have under that. But I always say sometimes we talk things in it's kind of like a meeting at the school. Sometimes they say something and you're like, I don't know what that acronym means. I should probably talk about
Yeah.
what is the acronym. So
Yeah.
and again, it goes back to clarity. Just we can't all
Clarity.
assume that everyone knows what everyone talks about, and that's the classroom in a nutshell. I'm not
Mhm.
even sure the kids know what I'm talking about half the time.
We hope so, but yeah,
Hey,
who knows? Yeah.
so talk about a little bit about the book. Because you have the podcast, and maybe a little bit about the book and how it all relates, and we can go from there.
Yeah. So the Pass the Baton book, again, Catherine and I we're working together, we're talking, we're doing all kinds of different things. And I guess the first thing that we were trying to figure out was what does it even mean for a music student to be empowered? Like what does that even mean? And what we were noticing at the time is they were talking about this word empowerment a lot in general education. We were hearing the elementary school teachers talk about it, the science teachers, the English teachers, all of that, but we weren't hearing the music teachers talk about it. So we wanted to first figure out what does it mean. So we kind of identified what we called 6 qualities, right? They have a voice, students have choices, they can create as well as just consume. They can ask their own questions and find answers. They feel connected to others outside the classroom. And then finally, they're able to really take ownership of the process. So that was kind of how we first defined what we felt it was for students to be empowered. And then from there, the book essentially just goes through each one. Like, this is what this looks like. This is what it means. Here's what it can look like in a variety of different contexts. And then we ended with a little bit of technology, which of course is outdated now. I mean, the ideas are still there, but when you
Oh,
put out a book in
technology.
2020, yeah,
Yeah, technology changes daily, and then it's kind of
exactly.
funny. I had this conversation. And I was wondering, someone was asking me about, what do you think about smart music? And I think the word that came right out of my mouth, it's a great tool. It's
Mhm.
not a solution because I think when
Correct.
you say technology, it could be gone 5 minutes ago. We bought
Yeah.
TE Tuner. I didn't realize it was available for the computer. Like I had no idea. I just use it on my phone all the time, or I have
Mhm.
tuners, and I didn't realize. So my computer at school actually has a microphone attached to it, so I can actually use TE Tuner in the classroom. And that was one of those.
Awesome.
Again, I just believe that every technology is a resource, and keeping up with it can be some of the hardest things that you have to do, because you have to like change along with the technology,
Mhm.
you know, because if we did a technology share, I think we would come up with at least, 200 or 300 pieces of technologies that
Oh,
we can
yeah.
use,
Yeah,
I
and half of them would be gone tomorrow and have something else in their place, but I think it's you gotta remember the why. Like, why are you using it? If it's smart music, what's the purpose behind that tool? Are there other tools that also do that?
Well,
Things
and
like that.
also it can be like, I can even think of it in this terms. It's also the person who's using the technology
Mhm.
for the classroom. It's like I was telling somebody, like if I lived at the North Pole and I was selling ice, if I was an ice salesman, I'd still be selling ice. And you could be, and you might not be able to sell any of it, because you have to be. I mean, we are salesmen, and
Mhm.
after all, we are selling a product that our students may not want at the time, and it's called practice. I'm just kidding. I digress.
Yeah.
um, that's why I say technology is a resource and a tool, because sometimes it's like it ebbs and flows. They might catch up to the technology, and they might need something that supplements it, or it might lead them to something else that does technology.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think when you look at technology too, there's so many different things that students have access to outside of our classroom. And if we kind of help them see how these things might work together, like, so many schools have Apple products, they have GarageBand. You
Hmm.
have this built-in thing that you can make music with, and it doesn't just have to be used by itself. You can use it with your instrument. You could play your trumpet, record it, learn about recording. You could add to it. Like, there's so much cool stuff you could do with this tech. But if we don't ever help the kids make that connection, they might not realize it, right?
Oh,
If we're just saying like, "No, the tech belongs here. This is banned. We must only band," we're just limiting their creativity.
oh my God, I love using GarageBand. That's what this little
Mhm.
keyboard here, that's not little. One of the things that I learned is, when my students, every once in a while you get yourself in a pickle of, like, I overshot what my students are capable of
Mhm.
doing from what I thought I could pedagogically teach them. And what I love using GarageBand for is I can take parts and transpose it, and I can have me play as a professional in their key, and I can make little practice tracks to listen to that have,
Yeah.
as I always say, style is nowhere on the page. And where are they going to get style from if they can't listen to it or experience? They're not
Mhm.
always going to listen in the classroom, or, as we know, play that video. How many kids do you lose the minute you put a video on the screen? And the dream,
Mhm.
the ultimate dream is they're going to listen to it and be just like that. And the truth is, they have to be engaged. It goes back to engagement. But that's one of
Mhm.
those things that literally that's my garage band tool, because I learned I can multi play anything. I can play a bassoon part, a tuba part, or I can, play in a part and then transpose it. Cool things can
Mhm.
happen with that. Um, all right. What else can we talk about today? I got digressed on the technology thing.
Yeah.
Um,
The tech stuff is fun. I love it. But the key is using it intentionally, using it in a way that supports what you're already doing in the classroom. Try not to think of it as just like a one-off. Oh, it's going to be a free technology day, right? Like how can we
well,
intentionally
have
connect it?
have you found that some people like think tech like it's like the be all end all answer? But again, if the person who's using the technology isn't engaged, it doesn't necessarily work. I mean, what's a good way, do you think, to share technology with people? Is it, do you talk about it in your conferences? Do you do it in the classroom? Is it something, I don't, how does technology work for you? What's a good way to share or experience it?
I mean, when I'm presenting, I try to find ways for people to experience it. So I try to like use it with the people who are there in the audience as much as I can. That's not always possible just because of different devices. But I want people to see that technology isn't something that we're doing as a replacement, but it's something that we're using as an enhancement. Right. So think about what your goals already are and how can we use tech to enhance this? If you're worried about something music theory related, is there a game that the students can play that's going to help with the music theory thing? Sometimes the nice thing about the tech games is it goes as fast or as slow as the student's ready for. Right. So you've got those kind of options, things like that.
I laugh because we were doing a presentation at school with the other teachers, and
Mhm.
it was with choir teachers, and they switched to solfege, and then my brain just went, can't we just say altered dominant? Because that'd be a lot easier for me than trying to say what's fee. Because I think all I could think of was fi fo fum at that point. I just laughed because I hadn't heard solfege, and I feel like, oh my God,
Yeah.
fee, which direction? I laughed. It was kind of funny to me. But is there anything that's been impactful to you in the last, few years in terms of just like the classroom and just things that you've learned or changed? Is, things that has things changed in your mind over the years? Just kind of that. Where are you at in terms of like your own development?
Yeah, I mean, for me, the biggest thing, again, that I'm seeing different is I have to remember that even though I'm going to use band as an example, I love band and everything concert band is, that's not always the thing that's going to get the students engaged, and that it's not
Mm-mm.
always the thing they're going to be interested in. And I think helping all of us as music teachers be open to the fact that there might be other ways of being musical that will engage kids, that's something that we need to start doing a little more. Um, just because band, choir, orchestra, whatever it was the thing that got us in the door, that might not be the thing that gets everybody else in the door. And how can we be open to it? How can we be okay with having a modern band, a popular ensemble, a digital music class, or any of those things? Because I think the goal at the end of the day, we said it before, we want kids to be musical throughout their lives. What's going to do that? It's not just about my band program. It's about as many students as we can participating in a music program.
Well, what do you say to the band director, choir teacher, orchestra teacher that says, I only teach, you know what I'm saying? Because
Yeah.
I think that was a change in me when I retired and went back in the classroom. I totally want and still want, my principal, if you're listening, I totally want this. I still want a class for kids in high school that they've never had music.
Yeah.
And so like I got myself certified in CTE and I started teaching music production at my former school.
Yeah.
And I at first, by the way, scariest thing I ever done, because the kids that take that class on the first go round, when you don't know any kids, it got scary. But then I realized
Oh, yeah.
people are people. It doesn't matter. It just we had to form a relationship. And as soon as that relationship, but what do you say to the teacher that I can only teach this? Or like, how many of us out there were band directors and somebody said, you're going to be teaching choir next year, and you go, but I'm a band director. It's like, my brain says, no, you're a music teacher.
Right.
What
You're a
do you,
music
what,
teacher. And I mean, and you're a teacher of kids. Like that's what your job is. Your job is to help kids find their way in music. And I think a lot of people are scared. You said you went and taught a music production class. I think a lot of people could come into that, go, but I'm not an expert in that. And that's okay. You don't have to be. You don't have to be the expert.
I have a secret on that.
Oh, yeah.
If you go onto your campus and you start talking to teachers on your campus, a lot of them are not specialists like us band and choir and orchestra teachers. And I didn't realize that until recently. Like some of them it's like us being a band director and teaching, I don't know, teaching electronic circuits. It's almost, for some of them, it's like that. Not everyone's an expert in what they're teaching. It's just that they find their way. There's another question, by the way, that's coming up that I'm going to ask. It says, do you use culture? Hey, look, it pops up when I say it. That's like magic. Do you use culture building activities in university classrooms, or what do those look like?
Yeah, absolutely. Because the way I look at it is, first of all, it's in the classroom, we need to have that environment of trust and respect and vulnerability. But also, I am modeling how to be a teacher, right? So my students will participate in a lot of things that are those kind of activities. And then what we'll do is we'll often debrief. We'll say, okay, put your teacher hat on. We'll all put our hats on. And then we kind of debrief and say, all right, what did we just do? Why did we do that? Why did I have you standing up and moving around the room to shut up and dance? Like, why did I have you do that? And then finding a partner to talk to, like, I model them as much as I can, because I want the students to think about, these are things that I can use in the classroom. And then they're experiencing it. Like you were talking about, we're experiencing this thing. We know what it feels like. We can see the benefits, stuff like that. So all of the turn-in talks, all of the different ways of getting them speaking and engaged and up and moving, I do as much of that as I can. Because again, I feel like you can't always do it if you haven't experienced it.
Well, I always think about, I think some of the things that we forget as teachers is that sometimes we got to put ourselves in the place of the learner. And how much do you enjoy sitting down for hours on end? And I think if you just think of the general elementary, middle school, high school student, how many of them are just sitting there? How many of them are just on a Chromebook or an
Right.
iPad and doing nothing all day long? And then you got to realize that, our music classrooms can also become that too. And it's okay to get them to move around, do things, get engaged. Again, I almost think we should have this conversation of doing things outside of the norm because it's okay and it actually might make the music better.
Yeah. Well, and besides just sitting, some of them aren't talking the whole time. They just like they are inside their own little heads all day. We learn so much when we process out loud. And when we can process out loud with another person, like you've said about this podcast even, right? We need to give them those opportunities. I mean, I'm all about having a quiet rehearsal when the teacher is giving instructions, kids are listening. But other than that, I want them talking. I want them discussing the music. I want them thinking and processing. And it's the same if they're in kindergarten or if they're, a graduate student. We need
And to
that
those of
processing.
you out there who have never taught kindergarten, just do it once. You will laugh. You'll be mortified for the first 15 minutes, but then you will laugh and have the best time of your life. I'm not telling you. Here's like my other, got my brain going now finally. But how do you teach university students that it's okay to make mistakes and that sometimes, and sometimes those mistakes are how we learn?
Oh, yeah. And that one's hard too, because
It is
again,
hard.
you're in a university, you're there to learn. You think you're there to learn to be perfect at your instrument, which we know now that's not going to ever happen. None of us are perfect. But yet that's something I noticed. And then also just to have fun. Music is supposed to be fun. Sometimes we take it way too seriously. So it's doing the goofy things, just like I would do them with with the fifth graders, with eighth graders. It's doing the goofy things, encouraging them to make weird sounds on these secondary instruments that they're learning, just encouraging all of that. um, this is somewhat on that line. One of the classes that I'm teaching, we told the students that we're not giving them grades. They're not going to be graded on their assignments. And there were some really interesting looks on their faces when we said it.
Like,
It's a class where
what?
they're mostly learning, just they're peer teaching throughout the majority of the
Mhm.
semester. They're in front of their peers, conducting, teaching, all of that. We said we're not going to grade. It's lots and lots of feedback, but there's not going to be that grade. And I think you could see relief on a lot of them that when they get up there to conduct, they're not being judged and evaluated. They're just able to do the thing and work
Well,
on getting better.
I ask this question of people all the time. Like I have a couple, like which is which is more powerful, truth or belief? And I will flat out tell you that belief is more powerful than the truth because you might not ever know the truth. So I ask this to kids, teachers all the time because we know what the answer should be, but then we know what the answer is. What's more important to a student, grades or learning?
For a lot of students, I think it's grades
It's
because
totally grades because
we've
what do I
kind
need
of
to do to get
drilled
an
that
A?
into them. Mhm.
And that's and I say this to students all the time. I said, if I had my magic wand, I would never grade this classroom. It's not
Yeah.
about that. I need the data. I'm such a data. I need the data. If you can't play in the key of G flat, by the way, kids, it's due this week. If you can't play in the key of G flat, I don't need to. I mean, I can hear the mistakes. I can hear I hate to say this. I can hear when students don't practice. I can hear when they do. But if you
Mhm.
don't put the inspiration, I goes back to this. Gosh, now we get to the podcast I want. The culture of making mistakes as a learning tool.
Yeah.
If you don't, if you value grades over learning, you're never going to learn. If you value truth over belief, and you're never going to find the truth. And you've got to shape your mindset a little different. I mean, maybe that's the encouragement for this week is how could you do your classroom different and get an even better result if you've been doing the same things? Don't teach the music. But you ready for my scary comment of the day?
Oh boy, maybe.
We've been going for 54 minutes already. So if I go on any more questions and any more tangents, we're gonna lose this. So, I've kind of changed up the end of the show, and it's really one of those things. And it's really not what's your culture, what do you believe, culture, content, blah blah blah. It really is. I would love you to leave your mark on our podcast today, and anything that you believe in, something you want to say. It could even be an amazing recipe for dinner. It does anything you want. But leave your mark on us today. Tell us a little bit about Theresa Hoover. We'll start the show. We'll end the show where we start the show.
Mhm.
Let's talk about Theresa Hoover.
I think that the biggest thing I want people to think about is how do we take ourselves out of the picture a bit, and how do we just listen to our students, really hear them, and move from there. It's not about what we want. It's not about our hopes and dreams and goals and all of that. It's really about them. And if we can put that focus on the students, I think we're going to make more of an impact that's going to last a lot longer.
That's amazing. I think you were an amazing person. I always say this, if I had my magic wand, I would just fly out and go watch you teach and watch your classroom. Because I swear this professional development I get every week is amazing. And it's a cool connection and it inspires us. And I hope it inspires all of you out there listening or watching. But we got a couple of things to share from you today on your socials. So if we can bring those up. So we have you have two Instagrams. Oh, I love I forgot this. You have the @musical Theresa, which by the way, Theresa is THERESA. Always a hard one when I don't know how to spell it. And then you also have @Pass the Baton Music Ed, all one word. I'm going to assume my audience can spell all of those words. Because those are super cool. And I don't know if we're sharing anything else on there today. Is that it? Oh yeah, I forgot. We didn't even talk about this today. Your website is fantastic, by the way. It's theresahoover.com. Everyone needs to go because that's it is great. Just go take a look at it. Go, access to the books, a little more information about who you are as a person. But as always, it has been super inspirational to talk to you today. It's like I just believe in the power. Right now my brain's on that. Go listen and see what the kids, get them to move around, do some things different. And who knows, you might discover that you teach more music by teaching less. But thank you so much for coming on the show today. I hope you had a great time.
This was awesome. Thank you. And you're right. The time just flew by.
Yeah, it caught me off guard because I have the little, we have, for those of you out there, I have a little red box up in the corner and I look up and I think, it's like we're 22 minutes in and now it's 54. Oops. Otherwise we could talk forever. And again, maybe we'll have you back on the show someday. Maybe the show will keep going forever. Who knows? But thank you so much for coming today. You have been an absolute pleasure.
Yes. Thank you.
Well, awesome. Well, thank you everyone for spending part of your day with us. And I know some of you are going to have a few cold days. Some of you have canceled school. Make the most of it. Turn on the fire, turn on the heater, turn on the electric blankets, do something, but stay warm, stay safe, be amazing. But as we wrap it up, just a reminder, I would love for you to share this podcast, maybe put it on your Instagram, send it as a link, make it something cool. Because when you do, it helps more people find us. And I think it's getting more and more amazing. And please come ask questions, be yourself, enjoy. But I always want to share out that I have my website, davidduarte.org. And my favorite one to share on that one is the Instruction Hub. There's lots of things on there. Go take a look. You can find lesson plans, all those things. You can actually contact me that way. My student teacher framework is up there. It is great. You can always reach me at david.duarte@me.com. And if I read my email, because I have, all the time in the world to read email. And I also have the show's Instagram @culture_before_content, which is really just a place for me to remind people to come to the show. And don't forget, this episode, along with many others, is available at musicforall.org/podcast. And a heartfelt thank you to Music for All for bringing this show and letting me host. It's so amazing. And thank you to Yamaha, who is our national presenting sponsor, for making it all possible. I'm David Duarte. Thank you for being a part of our culture today, and I look forward to seeing you next time.